All right, we're checking back in. Had a little bit of a tech glitch on the first take. I don't really know why, but this run portion got cut a bit. So it's now early afternoon, and I'm just checking back in, filling in the detail of how the rest of the run went. So the run was ultimately, like I said, it was my biggest focus. It was the number one thing that I wanted to execute at this race. I just really wanted to finish strong, and preserving my pacing and preserving my effort and fueling well and just continuing on was like literally the only thing that I really cared about in this race. And I'm really, really proud of my run effort. So the way that the run was set up was it was a 3-loop course. So 3 loops of around 8 or 9 miles each. And the run course was super, super fun. It started out in the canal area, like down at the Ironman village in the transition area. And then it headed out and it basically went around the lake that the swim was in, and there were a bunch of different portions that like kept it really interesting the whole time. So there was that canal portion to start, then there were some like just off the road trails that like had a lot of shade coverage that just kind of winded through. There were a couple of parks along the lake that it just wound around, and then there were some really nice housing areas and neighborhoods that it went through. So like within each loop, there just wasn't so much like monotony. When I think about the Ironman Indiana course, like it was just like an out and back, and you did that twice. And so it was just like 6.5 miles or so of the same exact thing, then right back, and then just again and again. And this at least just kept me mentally excited and engaged the whole time, which just set me up for success. In terms of like my pacing for the run, so my optimistic goal was 8:30 pacing, but I've also never run a marathon in its completion. I did not run the entire marathon in Indiana, and any of the ultras that I have done have all been trail type stuff. So I have never run a marathon. So just the idea of running this strong and finishing strong was just like, again, the main focus. Ran that first mile at sub 8, feeling really, really strong, and knew I needed to check down from there. So I ran about the first 9 miles at like around 8:30 pacing, and I thought I did a really solid job of just like checking down, kind of similar to the swim, like checking down if I needed to. A couple of the cues that I worked on were just like keeping my feet light, keeping my cadence up, and not really allowing myself to like get really frumpy and clumpy with like all of my strides. And I just sort of figured that if I checked in on those cues and if I kept my effort at a rate that I could maintain, while at the same point not like totally slowing down, I thought I could just sustain that. Saw Chelsea at mile 4, that was sweet. Made it through mile 9 at about 8:30s, and when I hit 10, I started to slow a little bit. I checked down to like 9:15s from that 10 mile to 15 mile mark. But I thought I did a really good job of like holding pace. Like it wasn't like my miles were just getting progressively slower and slower. And my whole like approach to the run was like, okay, settle into the first loop, just get through the second loop, and when you make it to the third loop, like this is the closing loop, like you're gonna finish the race strong. So I got through that first loop really well, 8:30s, into the second loop, drifted to 9:15s. Saw Chelsea at the 11 mile mark, which was huge. And one of my big focuses was to like look good and feel good whenever I saw Chelsea. When I saw her at Ironman Indiana, it was at the turnaround of the first loop, so heading out for the second, so it was the half marathon mark. And I looked like hell. I looked like death. And I felt like death, and I knew it, and I could see it in her face that she recognized that I didn't look good. So like, I just wanted to correct that for this race. So I saw her at 11 and just made sure to look good. Then I crossed the half marathon mark, which was kind of a benchmark to get through. And one thing that like I really loved about this Texas course is that like I felt like I was really frequently and consistently making accomplishments. So like the layout of the mile markers and the aid stations, like it really felt like every like 0.75 I was checking something off. I'm pretty sure that for the Indiana race, like it was basically like the mile marker was the aid station, and so it was like, I don't know, at the 2 mile mark, at the 4 mile mark, at the 6 mile mark. Like it wasn't exactly like that, but it was kind of like that. And with this one, it was like it felt like every 6 minutes or so, I was either finishing a new mile or getting to an aid station. And so that just like really kept me feeling positive and excited about the progress that I was making through the run. Once I got into kind of the 15 to 19 mile range, it really got tough for me. I checked down to running like 9:45s. My miles were slightly faster, but I did have a bathroom stop in there that was like a 2-minute stop. I had 3 total bathroom stops. 1 pee was at like mile 2 or 3, and then I had 2 porta potty stops that were like non-issue stops, but still just took like at least a minute or 2. I had a difference of 6 minutes between my moving time and my elapsed time on my watch. So 6 minutes of stops, with the biggest one being in that 15 to 19 mile range. And in that 15 to 19 mile range, that was where I had finished the second loop, and I had headed out for the third loop. And when I got to that third loop, like, I just really wanted to hold form. And I was starting to not like doubt that I could do it, but just feel that the duration of the effort was starting to wear a little bit. And so it was massively huge to see Chelsea at around mile 20. Because then once I made it to mile 20, like at that point, I had 6 miles to go. And with 6 miles to go, like I had a couple of training runs leading up to the race that were like in the 10 to 11 mile range. And I really made a point to like finish the back half of those strong. Like I finished those really progressively, honestly. And so like I at least had a familiarity to like, okay, like 6 miles, like this is where you know how to push, like you wanted this distance left, like you sort of targeted this, like now is the time to like really make it happen and really just like put out the effort that you want to finish this race strong. And I was super proud of how I did in those miles. I checked down to, I think I had actually a sub 9. I had a 9:29, I had a 9:14, a 9:06, and a 9:07. I think that those were 20 to 25. And so like, it wasn't some like dramatic charge to 7-minute miles, charge to 8-minute miles, because like, that's just not realistic of what I had. But like, I pushed on and made my miles 30 seconds a mile faster, which like for me, I was just super proud of that. I felt like I really pushed, and I really continued to feel accomplished with each mile. I really, as I was on that third lap, at that point, like I started to pass plenty of people who were walking, who were either maybe on their first or second lap, just doing the race slower. And I like really made a point to look strong and feel strong. And there were a bunch of people on the course in those final 6 miles that said like 15:08, you look strong, 15:08, you look strong. And so for me, like that just reaffirmed like you are doing it, like you can keep going, like you are doing this right now. Just hold on, stay in it, and you will finish this race well. And that was just like probably one of the more positive things that I'm taking from the entire race, is just like that mini charge to bring it home, and how I felt, how I looked, seeing Chelsea, having other spectators show me love and like support me and keep pushing me on. I actually just flipped ironically here. These are the notes from before the race. And I had relaxed, focused, and excited as like the 3 words related to the swim, the bike, and the run. So I wanted to be relaxed on the swim, I wanted to be focused on the bike, and I wanted to be excited during the run. And I think I did a decent job of executing on that. Checking back here though, one thing that like I really enjoyed about the race and the run course, well, actually, what do I want to check in on here? I'll get to that in a minute, actually. I don't really think I mentioned like my aid station logistics. So on the run, I said that I was doing the maple syrup, so I was putting the maple syrups into my 1 water bottle. I ended up losing my water and salt water bottle. It fell off somehow and I didn't notice. That was actually in the first loop, so I kind of had to adjust on the fly, but that wasn't really an issue because I was just still drinking at aid stations. But when I went through aid stations, like I would do the same thing that I was doing on the bike. So I would dump a bunch of water onto my head. I would throw ice into my jersey. I would throw water onto my face. Basically, like every time, I would just try to grab as many cups as I could. I was starting to develop, I told my mom this, I was starting to develop a real disdain for when there would be just like lukewarm water, because most of the waters on the bike were cold, but there were a couple of lukewarm ones that I got, and it's just like, that's not really cooling me off to the same degree. And it was the same deal for the run. Like sometimes there would be ice water, sometimes there would be plain water. They always have cups of ice. So I quickly recognized that just lukewarm water was not cooling me as much as I needed it to. So I would sort of on the fly do like a little fix around. But the big dump of the water onto the head during aid stations was just like massive for keeping my body relaxed and cool. There were like times that I would dump it onto my head or dump it onto my face or my chest, and I would feel like a chemical response from my body. Like it would like go into like a brief state of shock. I think, and it was just like a combination of like the heat. It was like in the low 80s, like 82, 84. Obviously just the duration of the effort and just like the physical output that I had done for the day, like my body was really, really pushing the brink of what it was capable of, at least at that level of endurance and that level of push. And so it was really weird to like feel myself dump water and my body like literally spaz for a second. But those final miles, those finishing miles, those 6 miles, were solid. I mean, it was really hard to keep going, but like the whole thing that I wanted out of this race was to finish the run strong. And I think that even though that the bike didn't go the way that I wanted to in the beginning and with my overall speed, like I still set myself up for a solid run. And so that had me like feeling positive for a vast majority of the run. There was one funny note of a dude that I had passed. I passed some guy at like in the first or the second mile. And he was kind of like a chattier dude, and I forget even what he said that got us to chatting, but I asked him what he was going to try to be running, and he said 9:15s, and he said he had a stress fracture in his tibia or something like that, and he said his doctor told him 4 weeks no running, and he's like, but here I am, and he goes, I'm out of my mind on Advil right now. And I was just like, damn, dude, this guy is just pushing on. And so little things like that, and like also seeing people who were in worse shape than me, but still just like continuing on, was like a really good reminder for me that like I can check down to my endurance effort and I can keep going. And I think that one thing that I've like had to really try to improve in all this endurance training is like my endurance pacing, because so much of like how I do this is like, yeah, I of course want to go faster, but like going faster, sometimes I just like push too much, and I don't really have a good gauge of checking back to that effort that I can just sustain. And so hearing from that kid and seeing some people on the course who were doing a good job of that at a much slower pace than me, was just like a good mental cue to like kind of get my shit together and perform an Ironman the way that you should, or the way that like people can. And then I guess like kind of coming down, so the 25th mile was a little slower, it was like 9:35. And I really think, like, I don't think that necessarily 26.2 was the most that I could have run that day, but I just kept thinking on that third loop, like if I had to go again, I'd have to really, really regroup myself here and figure out what the hell to do to keep going. And I think that like if I had known I needed to run longer, then I maybe could have paced myself differently. But at the level of effort that I was going, like, man, oh man, I was just waiting for 26.2. That was going to be so nice to be finished. One thing that wasn't super like just ideal about the way that the run course was set up, like literally the only thing I didn't like, was that once you arrived back to the canal area, you had a little bit more to do before like you really finished the loop. You almost like the canal, probably like 20% of the canal portion was actually on the early part of the loop, and like 80% of the canal portion was finishing the loop. So getting back to that Ironman Village area, I just wasn't quite done that at that point, but I was close enough. Kind coming down the finish was awesome. The way that the loop basically divided, it was like if you're going to loop 2 or 3, you head to the left, and if you're going to the finish, you head to the right. And like just being able to make that right turn, I was just like, thank the Lord, this is so great. And then coming into the finish, so the way that the finish was really set up was, it was right in this like town center that they have, and it was kind of shaped like a capital T. Like you'd come up the base, and you'd be like in the area, but then you'd make a hard right, and you'd go down, and then you'd make a U-E, and you'd come down, and you would finish, across like the top left side of the T. So when I entered that chute at the base of the T, I was really finishing like by myself. Like there was really nobody I was super close to in front of me, and there was really nobody that was very close to me right behind me. So I sort of had like my own moment, and there were a bunch of people there that would be cheering for everybody that came up. So like as soon as people just started to go wild, like I just had one of those things where it was like I wanted to cry, but my body just did not have the hydration to spare anything on tears. My chest started to like convulse, my heart rate shot up, and I was just like, my body is just so tapped right now. And it just felt amazing. I made the right-hand turn, made the left-hand turn, and brought it home, and finished strong, and finished with like a huge smile on my face, just like super proud of my effort, and just like feeling insanely accomplished. I really like feel like for Ironman Indiana, like I felt like I did an Ironman. Like I had no problem with the fact that I finished completely broken and beaten, but like this was my next go around, and so finishing differently was a big deal to me. And I feel like with this race, like when I finished, like I've really had the feeling of like I raced an Ironman, and like I competed in an Ironman. And I finished strong, and I paced myself well, and I pushed myself well, and I fueled myself well, and I hydrated, and I got my salt in, and I was just really, really proud. And I was just super pumped. Chelsea was there, Pig was there, one of my buddies, Boyd, was there. So it was really cool. It's so funny, like as soon as you finish, like if I needed to keep walking and keep moving, I definitely could have. But like as soon as I stopped moving, my body just locked up and nothing else wanted to move. So like very quickly it was like, oh my God, I gotta lay down here. Got some water, got my finisher t-shirt. One thing that was awesome about this race was that the volunteers were just really, really good. I actually recognized that it seemed like they had a volunteer who would like be assigned with each finisher. So I had this guy that like kind of stuck with me. I didn't really try to like shoo him away, but I was like, I know I'm good. But like he kept offering to get me water. He stayed with me through the 60 yards, that's the finishing chute before I leave the area. He hung there with me while we got some pictures or whatever. And so I just thought that was cool because they just had a lot of people that were just checking in on finishers. Probably like 3 other volunteers asked if I needed water once I was laying down and kind of looking like I was dead. But I felt solid. And yeah, crossing the finish line just felt so good, and I felt super accomplished. And even though like the time goals that I had really didn't come to fruition even remotely, I was super proud of my effort. And like at the end of the day, like it's me versus the course, and if I want to set a goal to go sub 10, like that was what I was hoping for. Like there's just some days where it's just like the level of performance that I've got within me, just that's not realistic. And some of the wins on the bike were 25 plus miles an hour. And so it's just like, it's not a huge deal if those don't happen. All the goals that I had really set were like based off of feel and based off of mental focus and based off of like execution with my nutrition. And I really felt like I took care of all those. So I was super pleased. There were 3 things that I thought really like stuck out to me as like big takeaways from this race. And number 1 was the power of connecting with someone on the course. So like both the guy that I chatted with, Fabian, at the start of the swim, as well as the guy on the ride, like I'm not really someone to be like insanely chatty, but I'm also someone to like easily recognize if there's somebody that like I can chat with. And so that's just something that I'll be a little bit more cognizant of moving forward, because both of those encounters like really flipped where my mind was at. And it's just so important to be able to have like resources to change your mental state. Like if you're not feeling well, like now I know in my toolkit, like, okay, if I'm feeling like shit on the bike, like maybe I'll start to chat to somebody. Maybe I'll ask somebody how they're doing, what their watts are, what their speed is, whatever. It's just like a good opportunity to just change my focus. And like the big thing is that it's like, I have the conditioning to keep performing. So if I just change my focus off of how I might not be feeling great in the moment, that training and that conditioning can just take over. And that's exactly what happened on the bike for my second go into the wind. Like all of a sudden I wasn't thinking about it, and I upticked my watt average by 8, in a 50-minute stretch when I was already 3. That was like the 3 to 4 hour mark of the race. So that's really big, like the power of connecting with somebody on the course. I also thought the power of like saying thank you to all of the volunteers and all of the people who were cheering me on the course. Some people, like when they pass other racers, they're like constantly saying like good job or whatever, and really like rah-rah. And I'm not necessarily like that. But what I was super cognizant of is just like saying thank you to everybody who said that I looked good, or saying thank you to all of the volunteers who were giving out water. And it's like showing that appreciation and that thanks and that gratitude is a way for me to put out like some positivity that then like cycles right back. So I can still tap into like the put out what you get type of mentality without having to be like hyping up other racers. There's obviously still opportunities to do that, and every now and then I will still say that. Like if I see somebody who looks like they're deserving of some love, like I'll give it to them. But I'm a little bit more focused on me. But I thought that the idea of just like saying thank you to everybody was really impactful for me. And it wasn't something that like I totally thought of before the race, but I recognized it in the race. And it was especially true in those final 6 miles where people said that I was looking good, because I kept saying thank you. It was like 15:08, you look strong, thank you. And I would just keep going, and that just kept cycling me through this pattern of feel strong, look strong, be told you're strong, say thank you, feel strong, look strong, etc. The other big takeaway, the third one, was really just like cooling off with water. Honestly, like the dumping of the water on my head at the bike aid stations and the run aid stations was like massive. I actually recognized that like some people have like the more aerodynamic helmets that are like a complete shield. And then they don't have any ventilation. And obviously, I'm sure that those people finished way ahead of me, so they probably have that figured out. But for me, like, it really helped to have the ventilated helmet that I could just wedge that sports water bottle into and just dump all over my head. So those were some big takeaways. Ultimately, like, I'm super proud of how I did at the race, and I'm super proud of how I executed. I was just telling my buddy Spina, like, I literally don't think that I have ever in my life said, I am proud of X. I am proud of X as many times as I have in like the past 36 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is. So I feel really accomplished. I'm really excited for my next race now. My next race is a 70.3. It's a local one up in Massachusetts, Patriot Tri, and that's in 8 weeks. And my next race after that is Ironman Florida. And I just feel like super at peace with where I'm at with my training and where I'm at with just like my position in the sport. I've been trying to get into this since February of 2019, so just over 3 years now. Because of a bunch of other reasons, I only got to do my first triathlon in June of this past year, so literally 10 months ago. And now I've done 2 Ironman. And I feel like when I finished Indiana, since I didn't quite finish the way that I maybe had dreamed up, I was like super eager to sign up for another race, and that was why I signed up for this one like a day later. But where I am right now and like how I just did that, like I just feel super at peace with everything, and I'm excited that I have races on the calendar, but like at the same point, like I don't really feel any pressure related to them. I have not done a shorter race since now I've done 2 Ironmans as my last races. So I'm super interested to see how I do at a 70.3. I know I'm going to be able to push really hard. And then towing the line at Ironman Florida, I mean, I'm going to have 9 athletes that I'm coaching that are towing the line with me. So there's going to be 10 of us. And that is just going to be an amazing experience all in itself. So I'm super excited for that. And overall, I just feel like very thankful that I've gotten into this stuff. I actually told a buddy yesterday, so I'll drop in a little tattoo story here with this. So this tattoo that I've got right here is a koi fish. And in 2018 and 2019, my #1 listened to song on Spotify was Who Says by John Mayer, all-time song. And on the surface, that's like a super stoner song. Like the main lyric is Who Says You Can't Get Stoned. But the real lyric that like resonated with me was like the second line of that song. And it says, who says I can't be free from all of the things that I used to be? Rewrite my history. Who says I can't be free? And I had a couple of mistakes in my past that I held on to for way too long, and that really like held me back from maybe changing the direction of my life. But even like on a greater level, you know, around that 2017, 18, early 19 year, I just like recognized that I wasn't feeling super fulfilled with my life. And I was just kind of living what I would describe as like a normal life. Like I was going to happy hours all the time and just drinking every weekend and doing the Saturday brunch thing and Sunday fun day and then hate Monday at work. And, you know, I had a really fun time living like that, but it started to dawn on me that I was living a life less than I was capable of. And just like pounding that song into my head for 2 straight years and just like grabbing hold to that lyric just was super important to me. And so the whole reason that it's a koi fish is because it's from a John Mayer concert t-shirt. That was kind of what I decided on, but the whole reason behind it was that song. And now, you know, it's April 2020 and my life looks a lot different, a lot different. And I'm really, really proud of that. I don't really put a lot of weight in the fact that like I'm a 2-time Ironman, but at the same point, I'm a 2-time Ironman. And this sport has really given me a vehicle to expand my thinking and expand my belief in myself and expand my opportunity to make progress on things. And so I'm feeling super fulfilled and I'm feeling really thankful, and I had a really fun time at the race. I'm really, really glad that it unfolded the way that it did, because I feel like I got everything I could have wanted out of it. And Chelsea and I were laughing. Before the race, I said that I think I can come in top 3 in my age group, and I think there's a chance I even win my age group. And Chelsea had heard me saying that, and I guess in her mind she was like, no fucking way, he's out of his mind. And in hindsight, I was totally out of my mind, because the guy that won my age group was low overall male, and he did it in 8:42 or something like that. He was running 6:42 miles on the back half of the marathon when I was still farting around on like mile 100 of the bike. So not about to catch him. But at the same point, like whenever I toe the line at these things, like I think that anything is possible. And obviously I have no idea who the competition is. And I have no idea how race day is going to pan out. But I really believe that I'm going to accomplish a lot in this sport. And I think that even though I'm super far from the people that are in my age group and better than me, I'm still making so much progress from where I was, and I still see such a clear path to more progress, that I'm just like, what more could I possibly want at this point? Like anything I would want that I don't think that I have would just be greedy at this point, because I've accomplished a ton. You know, I did my first triathlon in June, 10 months ago. And now I've done 2 Ironman, and I've really performed at an Ironman. So I feel really appreciative of just this opportunity, and I'm not letting it go. And I'm also super excited that the next race I'm going to be at is going to be cheering Chelsea on, cheering my buddy Adam on, and cheering one of my athletes on, Brian Riley, at Ironman 70.3 Blue Ridge. Shout out to Chelsea, who was an absolute rock star on race day. The logistics of trying to see somebody competing are chaotic as hell, and even though conceptually